Hi everyone, and welcome to another exciting Libraries Adventures this morning. I hope you've been enjoying our programme so far. We've certainly had some fun over the months, and it certainly makes the lockdown pass a lot quicker, doesn't it? We've had performance poetry with Joseph Coelho, where we turned fairy tales bad. We've practised our dribbling skills with Matt Oldfield and Tom Palmer. Rapperman taught us how to make a rap out of any situation back in August. And we learned how to create our own manga masterpieces with Taz. We've been to sea with pirates when we met Derek Kilty, and we travelled to space with Dom Conlon and Conrad Burdekin. And did you manage to catch our spectacular Christmas panto, where we had a story read by Dame Dorothy Trott? It was fantastic, so I hope so. I hope you got to have a go at some Bollywood dancing with local author Salma Zaman too. It's so much fun and great exercise as well. Now, can anyone remember who we met with last week? That's right. My colleague Amanda chatted with John Mayhew about his latest hot-off-the-press book, The Sprybrarian. We love that title here, as you can imagine. John also set you a couple of really exciting story-based challenges and gave you a chance to win your very own copy of The Sprybrarian. Did you manage to complete one of John's challenges? Or maybe you even managed to complete both of them? If so, we'd love to see your work, and it's not too late to send it to us. Here's our email address. It's lal@kirklees.gov.uk. And if you send it, you could be in with the chance of winning this great prize. Okay, now on to today's special guest. We're very lucky to have with us today multi-award-winning author Sophie Anderson. Now, Sophie has won the Independent Bookshop Book of the Year Award and the Wales Book of the Year Award, and has been nominated for the Philip Carnegie Medal, the Waterstones Children's Book Prize, and the Blue Peter Book Award, to name but a few, for her book, The House with Chicken Legs. Sophie's second book, The Girl Who Speaks Bear, has also just been nominated for the 2021 Carnegie Medal. Wow. Today, Sophie has come to speak to us about a beautifully enchanting tale of magic, love and courage called The Castle of Tangled Magic. It really is an exciting and wonderful adventure with some amazing characters you'll fall in love with, not to mention a really inspirational heroine. Anyway, that's enough from me. I'm now going to bring Sophie in to tell you more, to talk about her inspiration and journey as a writer, and to answer some of your burning questions. I give you Sophie Anderson.
Hello.
Hi, Sophie. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. And where are you speaking to us from today?
This is my home, which is near Penrith in the Lake District.
Wow. Have you had lots of snow down over there?
We haven't at the moment. We did have quite a lot, maybe about 2 weeks ago, but the last few days when everyone's been having some, we don't actually have any. You know, it's quite nice outside. But we have had our fair share, and I'm fairly certain we'll have some more at some point. We do get a nice covering up here, so.
Yes, it's something to look forward to, isn't it, when we can't really do much else, going out in the snow and making snowmen and enjoying it. So I've mentioned briefly that you actually have 3 books that you've written, The House with the Chicken Legs, The Girl Who Speaks Bear, and The Castle of Tangled Magic.
That's right. 3 published books. I've written lots more that weren't published, but I have published ones. Yes, people don't generally get things right first time. So my first 7 or 8 books were not brilliant, but that's how you learn, isn't it?
That's how you learn, definitely. And I think the titles of those books themselves are just intriguing enough to sort of draw the readers in. They're just really imaginative titles, aren't they?
Yeah, I didn't come up with them. So, I'm not very good at titles, to be honest. So I think all of them are my editors, or in some ways a collaboration. We normally have a working title, like The House with Chicken Legs. I just called it Marinka for ages, and I think it might have been my agent that came up with that one. But I always have some help with the title. So
Okay, so you've got a great session planned for us today, Sophie, and I, for one, can't wait to see what you'll be doing. Can you give us a bit of a hint as to what you're going to be doing?
Yes, I'm going to talk mostly about the Castle of Tangled Magic because that's my new book, and I'll mostly talk about the inspiration for it, basically. So I've got a couple of readings, and I have a few things to show you. So
Brilliant.
Yes. And then we're going to have some questions later on, aren't we?
Questions, yeah. We're looking forward to that. Okay, so if you're ready, I'll hand over to you, Sophie, and the floor's yours. So don't forget, you can type any questions or comments you have into the comments bar, and we will have a look at those later when we have our question and answer session at the end. Okay, so...
Aha, right, I'm big. So yeah, so as Leah said, I'm Sophie Anderson, and I'm the author of The House with Chicken Legs, which was my first published book, and The Girl Who Speaks Bear, my second published book, and my latest published book is The Castle of Tangled Magic. All of my books are middle grade adventure stories inspired by Russian or Slavic fairy tales. Slavic means from Eastern Europe. And they're all standalone books. So they aren't a series and you can read them in any order. But there are a couple of just small links between the books that can be fun to try to spot if you do read more than one. So as I said, I'm going to talk mostly today about the Castle of Tangled Magic, which is it's a magical doorway adventure with themes of bravery, belief in magic, belief in self, and there's also a small theme of remedying the mistakes of our ancestors as well. So I'm going to start with a short reading from the book, and then I'm going to discuss my inspirations. Now, I often find that it's the interaction of several separate inspirations that can spark the idea for a story. And with the Castle of Tangled Magic, there were three main inspirations. So I'll talk a little bit about each of those three things. And then we'll move on to some questions towards the end. So I'm going to start with the reading. I think I'm going to read right from the very beginning, from the prologue. Okay. Castle Mila rises from the shore of a lapping lake as vast and bright as a sunrise. Built entirely from wood and being 500 years old, the castle is a little crooked with age. But the pine log walls gleam like gold, and the endless roof domes, which curve higher and higher into the sky, shimmer and sparkle like silver. The topmost and biggest of the roof domes is as dazzling as the sun itself, and the thin spire on top of it reaches all the way to the stars. I call this dome Sun Dome, and I've often wondered what lies inside it. Castle Mila is full of secrets. There are hidden doors, passageways behind walls, and long forgotten chambers. Though I've lived in the castle all my life, I can still get lost and with a thrill of delight discover untouched rooms. One of my favourite things to do is explore the castle, looking for ways into the roof domes. Each one contains a small round attic, but the staircases that lead to them are all concealed. So far, I found my way into 14 of the 33 domes. Most have been empty, aside from dust and spider webs, and a warm, tingling feeling that I always get in Castle Mila's hidden spaces. But a few have contained treasures, rolled up maps and gilt-edged books, fine art brushes and half-full pots of coloured inks, carved wooden boxes filled with hand-blown glass beads and other trinkets that must have belonged to my once royal ancestors. My family aren't royal anymore, but Castle Mila is still our home. I was born in the warm and cosy kitchen on the ground floor and learned to walk along the castle's long and winding corridors. Mama has sung me to sleep in my third-floor bedroom that overlooks the lake. And Papa has shown me where I can climb onto the roof safely to watch hawks hunting over the meadows and cranes dancing in the marshes. Both my parents are carpenters, and they use one of the old ballrooms as a workshop. The floor and walls are covered with enormous pictures I've been drawing in there since I was old enough to hold a piece of chalk. Some of the other big rooms in the castle are used by the villagers who live nearby. My school puts on a show in the old theatre once a year, and the biggest room, the Great Hall, is used for almost every birthday, wedding, and wake. At these gatherings, I hear stories about the castle's history that are seasoned with myth and legend. There is a tale that Castle Mila was built by a lone carpenter using one perfect axe. No nails were used because the wooden pieces were cut to fit precisely together. And when the carpenter finished, the axe was thrown into the lake, which is why no other castle like it has ever been built. In the summer, I've spent whole days diving into the lake with my friends, looking for the axe. The search is fun, but I'm always slightly relieved when we don't find it, because there is another tale that I'd rather believe instead. My grandmother, Babuzia, says Castle Mila was built from magic, and that to understand why, I should talk to the spirits who live in and around our home. I've memorized her descriptions of house spirits, water spirits, and tree spirits, and searched for them all my life. A few times I think I might have seen or felt something, but after 13 years, I still have no proof these spirits exist. I keep on exploring though. There is nothing like the excitement of finding hidden spaces and forgotten treasures. I'm determined to find my way into every inch of the castle and discover all of its secrets. Now, more than ever, because I have a new baby sister. Rosa is 3 weeks old and makes my heart swell with love every time I look at her. I haven't figured out how to be the best big sister for her yet, but I want to be strong and brave and good and show her all the wonders in the world. So, if there is magic hiding somewhere in our home, then I'm going to find it and share it with my sister. Right, so that was the prologue. Right, so as you just heard, the Castle of Tangled Magic is set in an ancient wooden castle called Castle Mila. Now, Castle Mila was actually inspired by a real place. So this leads me nicely into the first of my inspirations, which is Russia's centuries-old wooden buildings. Russia has thousands of incredibly beautiful, incredibly ancient wooden buildings. Now, I have a book which contains pictures of lots of these buildings. It's called Architecture at the End of the Earth, and it's by William Craft Brumfield. And lots of the buildings in this book inspired me, but there was one building in particular that Castle Mila was based on, and it was actually a church rather than a castle. The building is called the Church of Transfiguration, and it is on an island called Kizhi Island, which is found on a lake called Lake Onega in Russia. And I'll show you a picture of it. Excuse me. Which way shall I go first? I'll go this way first. So, the Church of Transfiguration, it stands on Kizhi Island along with a few other wooden buildings, and they all overlook the lapping waters of Lake Onega. The Church of Transfiguration rises from a beautiful grassy meadow, and it has 22 dome-shaped roof cupolas, which are tiled with hand-carved aspen shingles. That's the same building. The church is so beautiful, it shines brilliant silver or dazzling gold, depending on the light, even though it's made of wood. And to me, as soon as I saw that building, I thought it looked like a fairy tale castle filled with magic, and I knew I wanted to set a story there. So, Church of Transfiguration inspired Castle Mila. Now, the legend that I mentioned in the prologue of the Castle of Tangled Magic, that Castle Mila was constructed without nails because the wooden pieces were cut to fit together, and that afterwards the axe was thrown into the lake. That is actually the legend that is told about the Church of Transfiguration. And indeed, this church is built without nails. All of the pieces have been cut to fit together. So I borrowed that legend, or stole that legend, straight from the Church of Transfiguration. Now, I'm not the only creative to be inspired by the buildings on Kizzy Island. There is a very famous Russian painter, illustrator, and stage designer called Ivan Bilibin. And he visited Kizzy in 1904. And I have a quote of something he said, which is lovely. He said, "Never have I beheld such an architectural vision. As the boat gets closer and closer, an entire pyramid of cupolas materializes before your eyes. Soon you begin to feel as though you are on the threshold of an enchanted land at world's end." And I absolutely agree with that. I think possibly the idea, there is a magical land in the Castle of Tangled Magic, and the doorway to it is in Castle Mila. So I can fully appreciate what Mr. Bilibin was getting at. Something else he said later on, he said that the architecture of Kizzy, in it, he found a confirmation of his belief that fantasy and awe are among the basic needs of even the humblest people, which is something else I agree with wholeheartedly. I think that fantasy and imagination are indeed essential things to keeping us healthy and happy. Now, talking about Ivan Bilibin, the painter, actually brings me nicely to the second of my inspirations for the Castle of Tangled Magic, and that is Slavic Spirits. Because Bilibin, he also loved Russian folklore and mythology, like I do. He painted a great deal of these Slavic spirits. I wonder if you noticed in the prologue of the Castle of Tangled Magic that I just read, I mentioned that Olia, the main character, her grandmother, Babuzia, believes that spirits live in and around their home. And the spirits that I specifically mentioned are house spirits, water spirits, and tree spirits. Now, all of those spirits are inspired by ancient spirits from Slavic mythology. And as I said, Ivan Bilibin painted or did illustrations of quite a few of them. So this slightly creepy picture, this is a picture of the Dhammavoy. Dhammavoy is a Slavic house spirit. And Bilibin drew that picture in 1934. That was his interpretation of the Dhammavoy. I think it's a little bit creepy, but it is true to what people thought Dhammavoy looked like. They thought quite often Dhammavoy were described as being kind of like small old men, so a little bit sort of gnomish, but they were often quite hairy as well, or quite furry. They're often also described as being able to change size and change appearance, and often being able to shapeshift into various animal forms. So that's why when I put the Dhammavoy in the Castle of Tangled Magic, I gave him the ability to shapeshift into a fox. And his name is Felix, the Dhammavoy. I'll show you a picture of him. The lady who did the illustrations for this book is called Sarah Soderland. And that's her interpretation of Felix, who is indeed a little like a small man, but he's also very foxy, and he does have the ability to shapeshift into a fox as well. Oh, I'm going to show you another interpretation of a Dhammavoy, because there are lots of people who are inspired by Russian folklore. This is one of my favorite graphic novels ever. It's by someone called Alexander Utkin, and it's also based on Slavic and Russian folklore. And he drew a house spirit, a Dhammavoy, as well. And as you can see, it's another kind of furry creature. So lots of people, Russian people and people with links to Russia, like myself, still believe in Dhammavoy today. And they might leave out offerings to their Dhammavoy as thanks for the help they give, because Dhammavoy are seen as benevolent, which means that they're good and kind, and they're often thought to come out at night and help with some jobs around the house, particularly fixing things. So if something needs sewing or a cup needs gluing, then, and if you find it done in the morning, it might be the Dhammavoy, your house Dhammavoy, who's done it. So quite often people leave offerings out for their Dhammavoy. In the Castle of Tangled Magic, Olia and her grandmother Babuzia leave out salt offerings for Felix the Dhammavoy. And in my home, we also leave out salt offerings occasionally for our Dhammavoy, who my children have named Christmas. Right, another of the spirits that I mentioned are water spirits. I'll show you the one in my book first. So water spirits in Slavic mythology are called Ruselka. One of my favorite pictures. That Sarah drew, that's Cascadia, the Rusalka, or the water spirit that Olia meets in the Castle of Tangled Magic. Rusalka have quite a fascinating history, actually. Originally, they were most likely benevolent spirits like Dhammavoy, so friendly and kind. And the original mythology suggests that people believed that Rusalka would bring water from the rivers to the fields in spring to help crops grow. But over the years, and probably because of the Christian church, Rusalka were twisted into more dangerous spirits who might pull people into the water. In my book, I kept them as benevolent spirits, so I like to think I went further back to a slightly more truer form of them. Ivan Bilibin, again, this painter I keep talking about, he drew a Rusalka. As you can see, I think she's a little bit creepy, so he's gone with a kind of interpretation. Well, I'm not sure, maybe she's slightly creepy, maybe she's slightly playful. I think they're always considered playful spirits. Cascadia in my book's definitely not creepy, but right, so the other type of spirits that I mentioned in the Castle of Tangled Magic are tree spirits. Now, these are called leshi in Slavic mythology, and they are quite often seen as quite mischievous. They're believed to lead people walking in the woods astray so that they get lost. But it's also thought that if you wear some of your clothes inside out, it might protect you from leshi. I'll show you a leshi drawn by Bilibin again. You can see it's kind of a tree man. He has some kind of pine cones on his head. I'll show you the leshi from my book that Sarah drew. It's another one of my favourite pictures. So in that scene, there's two leshi, and they're actually fighting. And that's because leshi are thought to be very territorial spirits. So in that picture, they're actually fighting over space. Right, so there are lots of other spirits in the Castle of Tangled Magic. and they were all based on spirits from Slavic folklore or Slavic mythology. I spent a long time researching the history and folklore associated with these spirits. And when I added a Slavic spirit to my story, I tried to stay fairly true to the oldest descriptions I found. And I tried to retain the traditional or some of the traditional elements of the spirit. But I would also sometimes incorporate a few new ideas of my own here and there too. Reimagining folklore, mythology, and fairy tales is something I do a lot of in my work. These things inspire me deeply, so I research them. And when I incorporate elements, I try to keep close to the originals, but I do also like to make things my own as well, by adding perhaps new features, and hopefully by also pulling them into the present. And I aim to make them relevant and exciting to the readers of today. Right, this brings me nicely on to the third and the last of the inspirations that I will talk about today. And that is a fairy tale written in verse by a Russian poet and a Russian writer called Alexander Pushkin in 1820. And that's the book, or one copy of the book. There's lots of them. So the fairy tale is called Ruslan and Ludmilla, and it was a huge inspiration for the Castle of Tangled Magic. When Pushkin wrote Ruslan and Ludmilla, he incorporated many elements from Russian folklore into the story. So he borrowed from Russian folklore in the same way that I do with my books. Now, I've long loved Ruslan and Ludmilla. It's beautiful poetry, it's a beautiful story, it's one of the most imaginative, playful, and folklore-filled books I've ever read. It's a fantastical fairy tale adventure, brimming with magic, courage, and love. It has humour, it has action. And for a long time, I've wanted to write my own reimagining of it, because while there are many elements and characters in Ruslan and Ludmilla that I love, I also think it's not particularly accessible to many young readers today. And it does also contain some outdated ideas and stereotypes that really don't need to be perpetuated in the stories of today. So what I did is I borrowed from this story, Ruslan and Ludmilla, lots of the ideas and the characters and the elements that I liked, but I left behind other parts of the story that I didn't really want to use. And the story that I ended up writing, The Castle of Tangled Magic, of course, I think of it almost like an imagined sequel to Ruslan and Ludmilla. I asked myself what would happen to some of the characters from Ruslan and Ludmilla after the events of the book. And that gave me the opportunity to explore some of the characters in more depth and play with some of the themes and perhaps some of the issues raised by Ruslan and Ludmilla in an imaginative way. Now, I thought, kind of to finish off my bit, I'm going to read you a small excerpt from Ruslan and Ludmilla, so you can have a little glimpse of what it's like, because it is quite unusual. The version I'm going to read from is translated by D.M. Thomas. There are lots of different translations, because of course this was written in Russian. And I actually find it quite fascinating how different translations can affect not only the rhythm and the rhyme of the poetry, but often the meaning in the story too. Anyway, this is a very nice translation, and I'm going to read the prologue, which is probably the most famous part of the poem, and it features lots of motifs and characters from Russian folklore. If any of you know any Russian folklore, you might recognise them. I just have a little report. Right. I haven't read this out loud before, so I hope I do okay. A green oak by the salt sea weathered, and to it by a gold chain bound. A highly learned cat is tethered, who on the chain goes round and round. Walks to the left, he tells a story. Walks to the right, a song he sings. What wonders there? There goblins scurry, a mermaid to an oak branch clings. On paths lost where the forest thickens, are tracks of beasts not seen before. A hut stands on the feet of chickens, without a window or a door. Visions fill wood and vale, there idle, soft plashing waves at sunrise sidle. Over the barren beaches sand, and 30 armoured knights a-glitter advance out of the clear bright water, a grizzled sea king in command. There I shall mention, just in passing, a prince holds captive a fierce Tsar. There people watch, through dark clouds massing, a warlock who's just come in sight, high up and carrying a knight. All wonder if they've travelled far. A princess locked up grieves most cruelly, though a brown wolf serves her truly. There Baba Yaga in a mortar sweeps herself over wood and water. There Zarkoshi drools on his gold, all breaths of Rus, the Rus of old. There too was I, much sweet mead drinking, as under the green oak I sat, listening to tales I marvelled at, spun by the circling cat, deep thinking. One of his stories I recall, and I will share it with you all. And then the book goes on and the cat tells a story. So there are lots of folklore elements mentioned in that prologue. And the character of the cat, the highly learned storytelling cat who's tethered to the tree, she actually found her way into the Castle of Tangled Magic. I shall find her. So there's the cat tied to the tree, drawn by Sarah, and of course that's borrowed from Ruslan and Ludmilla. I called her Koshka. She doesn't have a name in Ruslan and Ludmilla, so I called her Koshka, which actually means cat in Russian. There are several other characters in Ruslan and Ludmilla, the poem, that found their way into the Castle of Tangled Magic. Right, I'm going to show you two of them that are both actually illustrated by Ivan Bilibin, this painter I keep coming back to, because he illustrated a version of Ruslan and Ludmilla at one point. It's quite a big book. So this one maps it very well as a wizard. And the wizard's called Chernamore, and he found his way into my book. And this one is a giant head, who I call Goloff, and I put him in my book as well. So you can see, I borrowed quite a lot from Ruslan and Ludmilla, and but hopefully made it my own as well. But those are the three main inspirations that I wanted to talk about today. Obviously there were more than three inspirations, but those are the three main ones. I'm also, another inspiration is I'm always inspired by my family, my friends, the people I meet, the places I've been, and the books I've read. As I mentioned earlier, the Castle of Tangled Magic is a magical porthole adventure, which means that the main character goes through a magical doorway into a new magical land. So, of course, other magical porthole adventures have inspired me too. Books like Alice in Wonderland, where Alice, of course, falls down a rabbit hole to reach Wonderland, and another famous one, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, where the main characters enter the land of Narnia through a wardrobe. In the Castle of Tangled Magic, Olia, the main character, finds her magical doorway in one of the roof domes of Castle Mila, and it leads to the land of forbidden magic, which is a land filled with magical spirits and the land is arranged in several domes. So there's a map, and it shows there's essentially 4 domes: an air dome for the flying spirits, an earth dome, a water dome for the water spirits, and a fire dome for the fire spirits. I'm going to show you one more thing. This is the moment that she enters through the magical doorway. That's Olia and Felix entering through the magical doorway, which they find in the roof dome to go to the magical land. Now, the reason I'm showing you those things is because I have been asked to set a challenge for you. And I thought I would set you a magical doorway challenge. So I'd like you to think about where you would like to find a magical doorway, what it would look like, where it would lead, how it might feel to pass through the magical doorway. And I thought, once you've thought about those things, maybe you could draw a picture of your magical doorway and maybe write a paragraph or 2 explaining what it would feel like to pass through this magical doorway and describing what you might find on the other side. And if you're feeling particularly inspired, you could even draw a map of the magical land that you might find beyond your doorway. I thought one of the most fun things about writing the Castle of Tangled Magic was inventing a whole magical land and being able to put whatever I wanted in it. So all the spirits that I loved from Slavic mythology, I could put in this land. You can create all the rules, you can change the rules of gravity. So the challenge is to think about a magical door, describe what it's like to go through it, and describe what would be in your magical land, and maybe draw a map as well, if you like. I would love to see some of your work, so I will be keeping an eye on social media to see if any of you share your work. And I think that's it. That's the end of my talky bit, but I think with the little bit of time we have left, Leah's going to come back and we're going to do some questions.
Hi, Sophie. That was absolutely wonderful, and it was really interesting. I feel like I've learned so much about Russian folklore and architecture, and I've learnt what a cupola is as well. I never knew what that word was before.
Yes, it's a roof dome. Let's show my lovely picture again.
Yes, show the picture
sometimes
again.
Sometimes they're called onion-shaped domes.
Yeah,
they're actually that shape. I'm repeating someone, so I heard that they're that shape because it helps the snow fall off them better.
Right. Yes, and they certainly get a lot of snow in Russia. So yes. But yeah, it was really educational to learn all about Russian folklore and the architecture, which you describe so well in your books as well. I actually did read that prologue myself this morning, and the whole sort of description of the sort of Castle of Tangled Magic is just so vivid. It was just literally just how I imagined it to be. Some of the pictures that you showed of the castle. Yeah, it was amazing. And I loved hearing about the Slavic spirits as well, because that's another thing I didn't know much about. And I love anything a bit sort of spiritual as well. So it was good to learn some of the terminology, like the Dhammavoy for the fox and the leshy to describe the trees. And I love how you have this sort of imagined, how your books are sort of imagined sequel to was it Ruslan and Ludmilla?
Ruslan and Ludmilla, yes, indeed.
Yes, I'll have to look at that. Yes.
It's very, very famous in Russia, but a bit less so over here. I think perhaps because it's quite tricky to translate.
Yeah.
Obviously the rhythm and the rhyme would be a lot, more in Russia. So sometimes it reads a little disjointed, but it is a beautiful, beautiful story.
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely one to look out for. I'll definitely look out for that one. We've got some lovely comments which have come in on our social media, so I'll just bring some of those up so you can see what people have been saying. So we've got Nikki Lum here who says it's captivating. I would love it so much when I was younger. And then we've got a comment from Amanda here. Lovely to hear and see where your inspiration comes from.
Thank you.
And we've got a question as well. So this is a question from Tiffany. And her daughter is, how old were you when you decided you wanted to be an author?
30. So quite old. 30, yes. So, my mum is a writer. Right. And it actually put me off. You know how quite often you don't want to be your mum when you're young. So I actually became a scientist, and I worked as a scientist for years and years. And then I became a teacher. And it was when I had children of my own, and I took a little bit of time off work, and it was then that I started writing. And at first it was just for fun, just to write stories for my children. But I loved it so much, I became really passionate about it, and I just carried on doing it. So I didn't start till I was 30, basically. I always loved stories, but I didn't actually want to write my own or think about being published until I was 30. So I came to it quite late. I'm over 40 now, so it took a while.
So did children sort of give you a lot of the inspiration for the books that you eventually, for the stories that you eventually wrote?
Yeah, definitely, in a kind of roundabout way, because I started writing when they were very young. But I think when you have children, obviously stories become very important to you, because you start to think about what stories you want to tell your children. And I think that brought back a lot of the stories that I tell are inspired by the stories my grandmother told me. And when I had my own children, I started to think I want to tell my children stories like my grandmother told me stories. And so they very much did inspire me in a sort of roundabout way. I was thinking about what the stories I want to pass on to them would be. And it obviously links back to, you know, there's something that it's nice to be passed on over generations, isn't it? You know, perhaps with a little tweak. So every person
sort of tweak it slightly to,
you know. So obviously my story's a bit different to my grandmother's. Hers were always a little bit darker, but they have very similar elements. And it's nice to think that we're part of this chain of, you know, ancestral
keeping the story going, keeping stories alive, sort of thing. Yes,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so that leads us quite nicely into our question and answer section. So Sophie's very kindly agreed to answer some of the questions that we've got for her today. So we've got quite a few questions here. So I'll start by putting this one up. So this is just start with a nice simple one. What's your advice for writers?
I have a kind of standard answer to this. It's my read lots, because reading is probably, I think, the most fun way to learn how to craft a story. And so much happens subconsciously. If you read lots, you just start to build an idea of what makes a good story and what perhaps doesn't make a good story, and what works and how language works. And basically that's how I learned, because I didn't study how to write formally, but I read lots. And I think if you read lots, that's a brilliant start. And then the next thing is just to write lots, just for fun. Write poems, write letters, write short stories, write long stories. Just have fun with it, you know, just write all sorts of different things and experiment. And my last piece of advice is probably the bit I found trickiest, but it does help the most. And it's about learning how to rewrite. It's realizing that after you've written a story, put it away, come back to it and try rewriting it, not just editing it and changing little words here or there, but try rewriting it so the whole thing is better. And that's quite a skill. And I didn't learn to do it until I had help doing it, but it really helps, that whole, you know, being able to look at it and think, right, I'm just going to start again and do it better.
Well, that's quite a challenge yourself as well, isn't it? That's sort of actually rewriting the story, not just, like you say, just tweaking it here and there, but actually rewriting the whole story.
Think about big changes, like, could I tell it from a different point of view? You know, could I get rid of this character? Do I need that character? Do I need a different character? Could I start in a different place? You know, start to, you know, you might have written a really lovely story, but if you start to think, how could I tell this story better? You know, perhaps it would be better told in a different tense, you know, or by a different character, or maybe I need to come in later or go in earlier, or, you know, and make a different version of the story, basically.
Yeah.
It's tricky, but it's fun. And it's really how you start to learn to make a story be the best it can be.
Yeah, sort of keeping it about your own kind of ideas as well.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a question that's just come in from Kirklees College. What are you working on next?
Oh, gosh.
Secret.
I always find this so tricky because I want to tell you everything, but it's very early days. I've just finished draft 1, and I'm just reading through it before I send it to my editor on Friday. And the reason the authors quite often don't want to talk about their next one is because we don't know how much it's going to change, which links to the whole rewriting it. I'm going to send this story to my editor, and she might come back suggesting some quite big changes. So she might suggest that whole characters go. She might suggest it's set somewhere else. She might suggest that the themes change. So I will give you a couple of clues, but what the final book ends up being might be different to what I say, because it's going to go through at least 3 rewrites, I think. But what I'll say now is that at the moment it's set on a floating island. It has bird people in it they're based on something from Russian folklore, characters called alkonosts, who are bird people who can sing magic. And it has very strong themes of sort of friendship and unity, and the power of friendship and the power of songs and the power of storytelling to bring people together. So hopefully all of that will stay. But like I say, it's going to go through a few edits before it hits the shelves.
Okay, so it's a case of watch this space and
basically. Yeah. I love it. I'm really excited about it. I'm you know, writing's funny because it's ups and downs, and sometimes you think, oh no, it's no good. But at the moment, I'm on quite a high about it. I think I'm quite proud of it at the moment. We'll see how I feel when my edits come back, though.
You mentioned when you were just giving us a few hints about your sort of future book that it has these sort of talking animal characters in it again, and something that I've noticed about a lot of your books is that you not only have give personalities to animals, you give them to sort of trees, other inanimate objects, and you sort of give everything a sort of well-rounded personality, and something it was something that a colleague of mine picked up on as well. And a question we wanted to ask you was, do you see personality in everything in real life, or is it just in your world of stories? So in your everyday life, does everything kind of have its own character and personality, or is it just something that you apply to your stories with a bit of imagination?
I love that question. I think that's brilliant. And I think I do. I think I see personality in everything, you know, even inanimate things like houses. Like we lived in the same house for the last 10 years, and then last year we moved here. And it is the first house that we've bought. And as you know, when you buy a house, you look around at lots of different houses. And I think they do have, you walk in and they have a mood and they have a personality, and you're aware that you can change it by moving into it. But I think, you know, places do have an aura, or, you know, I'm not sure, whatever you describe it, they do. And I think, like you say, you can look at trees and they might be, and there's a hawthorn in our garden that's clearly very ancient, and I always get a wise kind of feeling off it. And then there are young birches that seem to be a lot more playful and and then obviously wildlife. You know, we watch, there's squirrels in the garden that we watch, and there's 2 in particular, and they clearly have quite different personalities.
Yeah.
If you let yourself be open to observing and watching and feeling, I think you do pick up that different things have different personalities. Definitely. A lovely question. I like that.
Yeah. Just a case of watching everything around you and
observe, watch closely.
Yes.
Roll Dalquay, was it watch with glittering eyes? And
I like that. Yes, that sums it up nicely, doesn't it? I actually another question which I'm dying to know the answer to this, was I read an article recently where you talked about rewilding children. It's something that you're quite passionate about. It's really intrigued by that word rewilding, and
I'm not keen on the word rewilding itself, actually, for various reasons. I think because wild has it can have some negative connotations. So I'm not keen on that word itself, but the idea that it encompasses, which is basically people getting out and enjoying the natural world. I love that idea very much. I think that the natural world, outside space, even if it's just a small garden, it offers just limitless opportunities for education, for emotional development, for imaginative play. It's you could have a space that's outside and an equal space inside, and the outside space is always going to win in terms of what it can offer your imagination and your education. If you look up to the sky, you can see the clouds and you can see insects. If you look down at the ground, you're going to see grass and insects and little places that could be magical portals to other lands. And I just think it's wonderful. And I really like that article. I think I'd been asked to write something specifically about what teachers were doing in schools, and kind of linked with the idea. It was to do with the girl who speaks bear, because she in that book she goes into the forest, and so it was about what we can gain by going outside. And for that article, I remember researching some things that teachers were doing, and it was incredible, just moving classrooms outside, not just for outdoor education, but having a maths class outside, and just the teachers talked about the benefits that they saw from children in terms of how much they engaged, and how there were more opportunities for them to discover things on their own and work together collaboratively. And I just love it. I think that the more we can use our outdoor spaces, the better. And it doesn't have to be a grand forest. It could just be a small garden and just growing like some cress. The more we can do that, the better. And, I know it's difficult at the moment because it's winter and it's cold, but if you make the effort and you go outside just for half an hour, how much better you feel when you come in.
Just going for a walk, or
absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, I always used to get really excited when I was a kid if we got to work outside. We got to go and have a look outside in the summer. It was lovely.
Absolutely. It's just it affects you emotionally, doesn't it?
It does, definitely.
You feel more connected. Just feel quite,
But another lovely comment just come in. Joshua, my 8-year-old daughter Eve says, "Please, can you write another book? I like all of them."
That's lovely. I love writing, so I will keep writing, definitely.
Keep writing, yeah. There you go, Eve. Okay, so we'll go back to the questions. Were libraries a big source of inspiration for you as a child, or even now?
Definitely both, yes. There's something that I miss, and there's something that I miss the most in lockdown. Absolutely, I do miss them, but they've always been a massive influence. Some of my earliest memories are my mum would pick me up from school and we'd go straight to the library. It was a very small library. I grew up in Swansea, and it was a very small library in Calais. But I can picture it so clearly now. It was a million years ago now that I was young, but I can picture it so clearly. It had a beanbag to sit on. I can picture the children's shelves. I can even name some of the books that were on those shelves. And I remember the first time I wandered into the adult section, and I remember how the librarian was really nice and didn't kick me out of it. They showed me some books that I might like, and we talk about what we liked, and we got to take these books home, which is just amazing, But absolutely a massive inspiration. It absolutely gave me a love of stories, and I love taking my children to libraries now, and they love it, even though we have lots of books at home. But just that open choice of more books and new books, and the fact that they can choose whatever they want, they're just such wonderful places. And I miss them. I miss going. I can't wait for the world to be safe so we can all go back to libraries again.
Oh, I know. So do we. Okay, so just one more question. I mentioned the awards that you've won, and also most recently you've been nominated for the Carnegie Medal. What does getting recognition through awards mean to you personally?
Oh, it's lovely. They're all different as well. They're always lovely. It's always lovely, obviously, to be recognised. Some awards are judged by children, so obviously it's wonderful to know if children have appreciated your books. The Carnegie in particular, I'm a massive fan of because it's judged by librarians. And my first book, The House with Chicken Eggs, when that got shortlisted, and I became quite obsessed actually with learning about how they judge it. And I think it's fascinating how they judge it, because I didn't study writing, so I don't often think about the technical aspects of it. But the way the Carnegie is judged, and they judge, the technical aspect of your writing and how well you're trying to tell your own story, I found learning about that process so interesting. And so, for The Girl Who Speaks Bear now to be nominated, it means that librarians have appreciated it. And obviously librarians are very knowledgeable, very passionate individuals who know lots of books. So for them to select that, it's hugely wonderful. It's a massive confidence boost. But I was actually talking to my editor the other day, though. We were saying, as wonderful as awards are and how lovely they are, what I think is really, truly special is just occasionally I'll just get a letter from one reader, and they'll say how much they loved a book and how much they connected with it. And in all honesty, there's no magic greater than just that, just knowing that you've written something that, even if it's just one person who really loved it, that is wonderful. I got a letter the other day and it made me cry, to be honest, because it was so beautiful, and that was just from one reader. So there are lots of wonderful things about awards and about interacting with readers, and each one has a slightly different feel, I think, but it's always wonderful, because most of the writers, obviously, we just write alone, and we quite often we don't have any interaction. So when you do get recognized in whatever form, it's like, oh yes, there's readers out there, hi. And that's nice.
Yeah, it's just lovely to see it appreciated and recognized. And yeah. Okay, so this is our final question. We always like to throw a bit of a wild card in. I hope it's not too much of a curveball. If you were a biscuit, what biscuit would you be?
Okay, right. You told me about this one, so I was thinking briefly. I'm going to go with custard cream, I think, because it's a seemingly ordinary biscuit, but inside you have all that good custard. And I think that's what lots of us are. I think on the outside we may be seemingly ordinary, but underneath we all have this amazing imagination bubbling beneath the surface. And I think that's the custard of our lives, isn't it? The imagination beneath the surface. So I'll be a cream, and my custard will be my imagination.
Oh, that's fabulous. I love that description. That's brilliant. You can't beat a custard cream either with a cup.
No, you can't, can you? They're good biscuits.
They are good biscuits.
Good for dunking as well. Good with tea and coffee. And bourbons are nice.
Yes, I know. I was going to say I just said bourbon because I think that's my favourite.
They are very nice too. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Sophie, for giving us such an open and insightful look into your world as an author. It's been really interesting talking to you. I'm just going to put our email address up. There we go. So it's lal@kirklees.gov.uk. So if any of you feel inspired by the challenge that Sophie set today, and you'd like to create your own magical door and send us a photo of what you've created, then this is the email address to send it to. So we've got another exciting Lal coming up next week. We've got Hannah Lee, who will be talking to my colleague Nicola about her latest book, My Hair. So it's a story about identity and empowerment. So be sure to tune in for that. And so we've come to the end of our library's adventures for today. So it just leaves me to say that although our libraries are currently closed to the public, Don't forget, we still have our amazing virtual library of ebooks and audiobooks available. And you can keep abreast of the latest information regarding reopening and all our upcoming events and announcements on our social media pages. So Facebook, Twitter, it's all on there. And you can continue to download books, including Sophie Anderson's books, which are all available on our Overdrive category. So it's just left for me to say, there it is there. It's just left for me to say a massive thank you to Sophie for such an inspiring session. And we hope you'll all tune in again next week.